This demonstration shows how you can configure and use descriptive flex fields in joint venture management. HEPP Corporation is the managing partner in the joint venture Permian Healthcare. The other partners in the joint venture are Best Care and Beijing Super. HEPP is required to store additional details about its joint ventures, such as legal name, facility type, locality, and so on. They must also store information related to stakeholders for legal purposes, such as the law firm name and contact details. Additional joint venture details to capture. Additional stakeholder details. We can use the Descriptive Flex Fields feature to add additional fields beyond what is provided in the joint venture management work areas. You can configure Descriptive Flex Fields for the following work areas: joint ventures, stakeholders. In general, configuring Descriptive Flex Fields involves creating segment labels for business intelligence-enabled flex fields, configuring global segments by providing identity information, the initial default value, and the display properties, configuring context segments by specifying the prompt, whether the context segment should be displayed, and whether a value is required, configuring context by specifying a context code, description, and name for each context value, and adding its context-sensitive segments, each of which is configured to include identifying information, the column assignment, the initial default value, and the display properties. Use a global segment to configure descriptive flex fields that are always available as fields in a work area. Use a context segment to configure fields that provide the context on whether associated context-sensitive fields appear in a work area. Let's go ahead and see how this can be achieved in joint venture management. To begin, log in with Joint Venture Application Administrator privileges and turn on the Profile option to enable the use of descriptive flex fields for joint venture management. In prior releases, you are required to set up the Profile option that enables you to configure and use descriptive flex fields in joint venture management. From Release 24A, you don't need to do this setup. Next, configure the descriptive flex fields to display the additional fields that you wish to capture for joint venture management using the task Manage Descriptive Flex Fields from Setup and Maintenance. Let's start with the additional information required for joint venture definition. Note that I have added the legal name, type and locality as global segments. Use global segments to configure descriptive flex fields that are always available as fields in a work area. Let's look at each of these fields in detail. Note that I have a list of values to choose from in the case of the field type. Note that in the case of joint venture additional details, there were no context-sensitive segments. Once you have defined the descriptive flex fields, remember to deploy the flex field. Let's now look at the descriptive flex fields for the stakeholder. Approve date is created as a global segment. Note that I have also defined context-sensitive segments for the stakeholder. There are two context-sensitive segments, one for company and the other for individual. This is because the information that is required to be collected is different based on whether the stakeholder is an individual or an organization. If the stakeholder is a company, then we need to store the contact name in the legal department and the phone number. If the stakeholder is an individual, then we need to store the name of the law firm representing the individual, the contact name for the law firm and the phone number. Use a context segment to configure fields that provide the context on whether associated context-sensitive fields appear in the work area. Let's look at the details of the context segments. Next, let's see how we can use the descriptive flex fields to store the additional information on the joint venture and stakeholder. Log in as the joint venture accountant and navigate to manage joint venture definitions from setup and maintenance. Notice that the additional fields, legal name, type, and locality are available in the Manage page. The descriptive flex field attributes for the joint venture are available in the new tab, Additional Information. Let's look at the additional attributes for the stakeholder. For the stakeholder, we have made use of both global and context segments. Approve date is implemented as a global segment. Organization type is implemented using context segments. Navigate to the Additional Information tab. When the organization type is individual, the additional details to be stored are law firm name, law firm contact name, and law firm contact phone. When the organization type is company, the additional details to be stored are legal department contact name and legal department contact phone. This concludes this demonstration.